Good evening. My name is Guy Vanderhaeghe. Saskatchewan people have always taken pride, some might say a pride verging on masochism, in their resilience, their ability to bounce back from steep economic downturns, appallingly severe weather, and the Rough Riders' erratic play. Typically, Saskatchewan is next year country, and its cities next year cities. Then global demand for our natural resources gave Sleeping Beauty the prosperity kiss, and she awoke to population growth, rising real estate prices, business expansion, and the scramble to deal with infrastructure deficits. Now, however, once again, the boom appears to be waning, which raises tonight's question: how do cities and communities build themselves to thrive in difficult times? Unlike the other speakers this evening, I have no experience in government, business, public policy, or planning. A writer of fiction, I can only address this topic from the perspective of someone who has lived his entire life in and through his imagination, offer a flight of fancy and a few thoughts about what role arts and culture might play in sustaining the thriving, vibrant, resilient city. Richard Florida's work on what he describes as the creative class has demonstrated that concentrations of artists of all kinds, of people engaged in the transmission of ideas, results in higher levels of urban economic development, a formula frequently seized upon by artists to justify their existence, proof that they aren't merely shiftless bums, but good for the economy. The problem with this position is that it suggests that words like vibrant and thriving have no validity aside from what can be measured by a cost-benefit analysis. Still, what communities often fall back on in bad times are things that cannot be measured: shared values, a city's belief in its distinctiveness, its citizens' sense of belonging to a place and tradition. Linked to these are the identity that arises from the cultural capital that cities gradually accumulate, the architecture and monuments, the museums, the art galleries, the theaters that come into being over decades. A capital continually added to and elaborated upon artists living in the here and now. It might be argued that, at least in part, New Orleans found its feet after the devastation of Katrina because of its rich musical heritage, a heritage that the city's musicians refused to let die, and that their efforts to preserve helped bring the world back to New Orleans' doorstep. In the darkest days of World War II, a remarkable literary magazine, Horizon, was founded in London to champion the civilization that Nazism wished to destroy. In wartime Paris, the newspaper Combat, staffed by writers like Camus and Sartre, encouraged resistance to the German occupation. These examples of quixotic resilience can't be monetized because a dollar value cannot be assigned to a cultural heritage or a way of life. Everybody applauds resilience, but few people have anything good to say about failure. Yet you don't have one without the other. People don't boast about how they bounced back from a big success. Artists have a lot of experience with failure, and so can teach us a lot about resilience. Most often, they lose before they win. Most Parisians loathed the design of the Eiffel Tower and expressed delight that it was slated for destruction when the 1889 exhibition ended. Today, the tower is the Parisian tourist site. James Joyce's Dubliners and Ulysses were banned in his native city. Now tourists walk the streets of Dublin, his books in their hands, retracing the steps of Joyce's characters. Both Eiffel and Joyce ran big risks, courted failure, and helped to define their cities. Despite a good deal of lip service paid to risk-taking, Canadians seem increasingly terrified of failing. Corporations sit on huge capital reserves, reluctant to invest under anything but fail-safe conditions. Politicians hew to talking points, to staying on message for fear that any unscripted moment might expose them to political disaster. Everybody insists on playing in a risk-averse playground from which the teeter-totters and other life-threatening impedimenta have been banished. No one dares to profess a vision for our cities that goes beyond talk about property taxes and potholes, because visions by definition are aspirations, and aspirations can never be total successes. They will always fall short. Martin Luther King dared to announce, "I have a dream," because to move things a little, he was willing to permit himself to hope for a lot. Do we lack that capacity? Let me make a truly radical, perhaps tongue-in-cheek proposal. To foster a little more resilience, maybe we ought to invite artists to participate in discussions about the future of our urban spaces. Artists are inveterate risk takers, maybe because they have so little to lose. Most live on the margins, at or below the poverty level, covering the costs of making their art with badly paying jobs. In effect, their unpaid labor subsidizes the accumulation of cultural capital that benefits everyone. Artists have a reputation, sometimes earned for unconventionality, for saying and doing things that are the opposite of staying on message. This may be why, while governments feel they have a duty to consult with business and union leaders, artists are hardly ever invited to the adults' table. What artists claim, that artistic expression deepens and broadens human experience, enriches the quality of life, that it is an intrinsic good in and of itself, is seldom a topic of discussion in boardrooms, political caucuses, or union halls. No one with a scrap of prudence would claim that economic issues are of no importance, but the question needs to be asked, are they of sole importance to the life of vibrant, thriving cities? Most artists would say they aren't. Artists have historically tended, I use the word with reservations, tended to support free speech, human rights, tolerance, liberal education, open debate. Admittedly, artists take these positions not because they are nobler, wiser human beings than their fellow citizens, but because these things provide the soil in which art thrives. I would add that they also happen to be identified with good democratic practice, which right now could use a little pick-me-up. Maybe the time has come for Canadian urban centers to reconsider the seating arrangements around the table on the off chance that adding another chair to it, hearing another perspective, might help prepare us to more gracefully and humanely weather the hard times that are always just around the corner. Thank you.